Welcome to Why Is This a Podcast? I am your host, Kieran Watts. Please like, please subscribe, please wear a mask, please get the vaccine if you're offered it, and please vote in the upcoming Senedd election in Wales. Voting is something that so many people died and gave so much for to have as a right. And whether you agree with the concept of the Senedd or not, just do it. There's parties that want to abolish it, just vote for them. In any case, the reason why I mention the Senedd election in Wales, which is happening on May the 6th, is because my guest tonight is actually standing as a candidate in said election. And I'm really excited to have him on. He spent more than a decade as a charity campaigner on issues including homelessness, poverty, and mental health. Joining me now is Oliver Townsend. Hey, Oliver.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being here. You're the Liberal Democrat candidate for Islam.
That's right.
I think I'll try my best not to hold that against you.
It's fine.
No, but it's honestly, it is really nice to have somebody who's very, very passionate, very engaged with the community, very engaged with the issues. You're a disabled gay man, as you've mentioned. And we'll come on to that later on. I just want to ask, first of all, what drew you to politics in the first place?
Yeah, so my dad was a Lib Dem politician years ago. And for a long time, politics to me was just something you did for your dad. So, you'd be up, like, one of my earlier memories is, I think I was about 11 or something. And I think it was the first episode of New Tricks. And I never saw the end of it because my dad called me in and I had to sit at the table and stuff leaflets and things. But when I was about 15, so after about 4 years of like politics just being that kind of, oh God, more delivery, more leaflet folding, it was the time leading up to the invasion of Iraq. And that's when I got really sort of passionate and angry about that. In my view, it was and still is one of the biggest sort of foreign policy mistakes we've ever made as a country, maybe apart from Suez Canal scandal. And yeah, at that time, I remember thinking, oh, I'm 15, I just feel really powerless about this, but I'm sure our MPs are going to do the right thing. They must see what we can see. And so when the vote went through and they, Parliament approved the invasion, I remember I just turned to my dad then. I was like, oh, can I join then as a member? Which is really funny because I think people, when they see young people who've joined a party, they assume it's because of their parents. And obviously, for me, it was influenced by them. But yeah, it was just seeing what was happening in the country when I was younger and wanting to do something about it. So yeah, that's probably the first sort of political awakening, really.
Interesting you say about a sense of powerlessness, because I think that's what, when you said that, it sort of drew my mind to, two things really. The first being the climate crisis, and the protests by young people against sort of government inaction against this environmental catastrophe that we're all living through.
Yeah.
And the other one was the Black Lives Matter protests. That was the other thing I thought of, where there is a sense among young people of powerlessness, and there is a sense of, sorry for the crude language, but almost a sense of, well, we're fucked here.
Yeah.
We're screwed. We've got people who are much older than we are who are making these decisions that impact our lives. And we're recording this on Saturday after the verdict of George Floyd. My episode prior to this, I addressed that at the beginning. But yeah, no, I completely get that, and I've looked into the Iraq War, and I've looked into that, and the scale of the protests, and it's almost like for every generation there's like a catalyst for people to think, I want to get involved in this.
Yeah.
I want to do something here. So why did the Liberal Democrats appeal to you, aside from the Iraq War? Because I know that Charles Kennedy, the late Charles Kennedy, I know that he was arguably the UK's most prominent critic of the Iraq War. But why did the Liberal Democrats appeal to you as the best way for you to be an agent of change?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's one that, I suppose that's one that goes right to the heart of, I suppose, who I am. So I talked about feeling powerless kind of during kind of the protest and the vote against or for the war in Iraq. At the same time, I've grown up. I think I had my first operation when I was about 6 months. I was born with a condition called talipes, which is known, I suppose, colloquially as clubfoot. And I've been in positions in the NHS where I've felt really powerless. I haven't been able to make decisions about my own care. I was in positions where, I had amazing care, but there were examples where it wasn't great as well. And I had operations till the age of 19, so I've had quite a few different examples. And I was always aware when I was kind of not trapped, because that makes it sound overly horrible, but you are very much dependent on people's care when you're disabled in any way, and that does lead people to feel powerless. And then the other one,
I don't think trapped is an overstatement. I think that trapped is a very apt way of framing it, because when you're disabled, be it physically or mentally, or emotionally, in a certain sense you are trapped because you don't have control over your own body, over your mind, or any number of things. You don't have that control. So I don't think trapped is is sort of exaggerating at all. I just wanted to say that for anybody watching who is disabled, who might feel that way. I mean, because I apply it to women's health issues, for example, like sort of menstruation or menopause. Like, it's not a bad thing to have this sense that you're not in control of something, and for that to make you feel confined, to make you feel limited.
yeah.
As much as disabled people contribute so much as you do to society, I just wanted to put that out there. But I apologize for interrupting.
No, it's good
Please
to know. And I think the other experience I had of feeling powerless was, being in school and experiencing a lot of bullying. I went to a Catholic school, so experienced a lot of bullying around being gay as well. And again, there I felt powerless and trapped because I wasn't able to, talk to the teachers. I wasn't able to get help or support. So, and the reason why that's linked to the Lib Dems, I suppose, is what that has given me is this really strange combination of respect for authority and a natural distrust of it. So I'm not a sort of massive radical who thinks that we don't need any kind of authority or laws or anything like that. But I do think that all power, all rules, all law should be challenged. And it should never be easy for someone to take away your rights or your power or your autonomy. And at the time, as well as the war in Iraq, there were also conversations around identity cards. And I was just aware that that was something that was broadly supported by the Conservatives. It was obviously being proposed by the Labour Party. And I could see the Liberal Democrats at the time saying, no, this isn't okay, that we don't need to sacrifice our freedoms to kind of remain safe from terrorism, for example. And that just really resonated with me, was that sense that it's okay for the state to have power as long as it's challenged, as long as it's accountable, and as long as people's freedoms are protected. So I suppose for me, that's why I got involved, as completely as I have done, really.
I do want to sort of touch on the facts, because obviously we're both Welsh. You grew up in Newport, I believe.
Yeah.
I've grown up in the valleys myself. Areas which have been crushed by austerity in the 100 years since the Conservatives came to power under David Cameron, or at least that's how it feels. So there's a lot of mistrust towards the Liberal Democrats because of the coalition and the policies implemented under that coalition government. How do you go about winning that trust back?
Yeah, that's probably the most difficult question that any Lib Dem's ever going to be asked, I suppose. I think back to 2010, when the election had happened, when there was a debt crisis that was sweeping through Europe, and there was a very real panic and fear with people about what would happen if there wasn't a stable government. I think in hindsight, it probably would have been good for the Lib Dems to have taken a step back and said, actually, let's let the Conservatives govern alone. But the context of the time, which is very easy to forget, is there was this absolute terror running through the markets about, what would happen if Greece collapsed? Would Italy be next? So I understand. I don't fully agree, but I understand why a lot of Liberal Democrat politicians decided to form a coalition, because it did offer some sort of strength in terms of sort of the markets. I also think there were certain good things that we did do, and I think, the income.
I certainly think that the Liberal Democrats mitigated the Conservative Party agenda. I certainly do believe that. I do believe, although on the other hand, that the Liberal Democrats played the role of kind of an enabler of some of the Conservative Party's worst instincts in that government, in particular with regard to student, tuition fees.
It's a really tricky one, because I think I led a campaign against tuition fees and top-up increases when Plaid and Labour increased them in Wales. And I remember I was so angry when they went back on their word. So I get it. I was a student at the time when Plaid and Labour did it in the Senedd, and I was so angry. And then about a year later, the Liberal Democrats did it in London. And I remember at the time thinking, why would you do that? I was very angry about it. And there was a period of time where I was quite distant from the party. I was still a member, but I didn't campaign much because, I was really disappointed by it. I think sometimes this is one of the big weaknesses of the Lib Dems. And I'll just, I'm an honest person, so I'll be honest here. I think...
It's a no spin zone here, Oliver.
Brilliant.
No,
That's
no,
definitely no spin.
well, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Definitely.
So help you God.
So Lib Dems are very, we love policy, most of us. We really like details, and we like doing things that are right, if not just easy. And, you know, it's also easy to forget that the Lib Dems have not been in government for, in 2010, they hadn't been in government for, I think, just under 100 years, and it's also fair to say, I think the Conservative Party, certainly in Westminster, and I don't mean this in a really horrible way at all, but they are very experienced at power. They know how government works, they know all of that, and they're not afraid to make really tough decisions. I think one of
they've been in power. Well, they've been in power for the majority of my lifetime. I think I'm thinking back to before then. Obviously, about Thatcher was prime minister for about a millennium, followed by Major for about another millennium. So I get the point about them being them being used to being in power.
Yeah, and I think part of us as a party was very naive about going into government, and I think Nick Clegg, as much as people hate him sometimes, he was naive. I think he thought, okay, I've made this pledge, but if I go in and I explain to people that I think this is better than what I promised, they'll understand, because actually, in terms of the outcome of what was decided, it is largely, it's not exactly, but it's largely like a graduate tax. So actually people have to start paying it back much later. The debt is not kind of included in the sort of debt package that you might normally have when you're looking for things like kind of credit or mortgages. So a part of me wishes that we had just stuck to our guns and asked for a graduate tax, to be honest, rather than this sort of half and half tuition fee. So, and then I think, so I think him going against that promise, he felt it was the right thing to do, because I think he genuinely thought he'd replaced it with something that was better. And I agree with that. But
that they could be a moderating influence.
Yeah, basically. So, but in terms of, so that's kind of the tuition fees and the kind of austerity, but having worked where I've worked for the past 10 years, I saw some of the impacts of that. So I'm not going to pretend, that it was all kind of,
It was all rosy.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to say it was all Guns N' Roses, and I was like, no, that's a band. Yeah, that just wouldn't be right. And so in terms of the actual answer, the actual answer to the question, how do we win back trust? I think it's about being honest with people, and the reason I've taken quite a while to kind of talk through that is not because I'm trying to hide from anything. It's because I think being honest in politics is really hard, because often you don't get the time to kind of really explore the details of what you're trying to say. So that's just for any of your kind of people watching this, that's the reason why it's important to take the time sometimes to explain things. But yeah,
in all fairness, bugger all people watch this, so I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, well, maybe in the future they'll come back and look at this and go, oh, that was a really long answer.
When they're looking at First Minister Oliver Townsend. It's a good. I appreciate the transparency of the answer, because my first general election was 2019, and I didn't vote Liberal Democrat. I won't say who I did vote for, but I didn't vote Liberal Democrat. But when you were talking about sort of Clegg being naive, I had in my head about Jeremy Thorpe, who, for those out there who don't know, was the leader of the Liberal Party in the 70s. Fascinating story behind him, trying to have someone bumped off allegedly. But he was kind of the power broker. And was it. I think it was the 1974, one of the 1974 elections.
I believe so. It was in one of the parliaments, but
I think it was the first one of 1974, February.
Yeah, I think so.
1974.
I'm not amazing at liberal history.
But that there was like the offer of Thorpe becoming part of the cabinet if they would prop up the government at the time, and Thorpe had certain demands and they wouldn't acquiesce, so he completely bowed out of the agreement. And then the sitting government, I think it was either Harold Wilson or Edward Heath, but one of them said, right, we'll give you a cabinet position, and if you prop up our government, our minority government. And he said, no, if you won't agree to this demand. So, I mean, that's what came to my mind when we were talking about Clegg. A little bit of history that's half informed. I want to sort of come to the point of identity. And I want to quote you directly, if I may. Where you've said, I am a gay and disabled man, and it has taken me a long time for me to say that so openly. Could you elaborate on what you mean by that?
So being disabled is a bit of a sort of strange experience because there's something called the social model of disability, which some of your viewers might be aware of. But basically that's saying that you're only really disabled because society isn't set up to allow you to live freely. So as an example, if you are a wheelchair user and there's no drop curbs, it can take you so much longer to just do something as simple as going shopping than, say, someone who's not disabled. So I was really lucky with my mum and dad that they would sort of like drop me into Newport town centre. They'd drive me to see my friends, and so I never really, I used to, in hindsight, I had the privilege to say that I wasn't disabled. I used to get really defensive about it when people spoke to me. And when I went to university, obviously then on my own, that's when it just hit me that, oh, no, I am disabled because I couldn't get to lectures. I couldn't do my food shopping that easily. And that's when I had a massive sort of mental health crash. So I finally started talking about myself as disabled then, because that's when I realized I was. And it sounds really stupid to say it like that sometimes, but it's not until...
I get you.
Yeah. And in terms of being gay, I grew up in a Catholic family. I went to a Catholic school. Before I realized I was gay, I wanted nothing more than to be a priest, which is one of my interesting, strange facts about me, that I wanted to be a priest. I was desperate to be a priest. And, all I wanted was to have a sort of parish church somewhere. And my whole life would be spent just looking after people and making sure they were okay. And when I realized I was gay, that kind of wasn't possible anymore. So there was a lot of shame about that, not because of my family, but because of my religion.
Yeah.
And that stayed with me for a long time. So the reason I started writing about, about it taking me a long time to say so openly was I just wanted people to know that it's not easy to sometimes say those words. There'll be people who are in Islwyn at the moment, people who live there who are gay or disabled, who maybe feel scared about saying it, or they feel shame. And I just kind of wanted to, if I do nothing else as a candidate, even if I get one vote, at least I will have stood for people who are disabled and gay, who will know that there are people there who can be proud of what and who they are.
But I'm not physically disabled, but I'm on the autistic spectrum. I've been diagnosed with mental health issues. I've had addiction issues. And I'm also part of the LGBTQ community. What you say there, where I said, yeah, I get it. It's because, yeah, it is hard to sort of face up to, in a certain way, yourself, and to think, well, this is part of me, but it isn't who I am. It's not just who I am. This is a part of me, but I'm not just this. But then to think, well, this is something I have to be ashamed of. This is something I have to hide, and something that I'm going to hold back.
Well, and it's really interesting you say that, because when I announced that I was a candidate for Islwyn, I wrote a press release which was covered in the Argus, in which I was quite open about being gay. And there were a few people before I sent that in, people I know, not anyone who's political, who said, "Do you want to do that? Do you want to really kind of openly admit that in Islwyn?" And I just said, well, first of all, like, I don't know where you think Islwyn is, but it's hardly like South America. So, like, I think we can trust people in Islwyn to
We're not in Turkmenistan here.
Yeah, so I think you can trust people in Islwyn to be just as, compassionate and supportive as anyone anywhere in Wales. And secondly, if there is a problem, then that's exactly when you need to stand up and be counted, So if there are people in Islwyn, and I can't imagine there's many, who have a particular issue about someone who's gay, well, hopefully them seeing me standing and hopefully being a decent guy will make them go, okay, no, this is okay. So yeah, and I didn't have a dilemma at all, but I would have done 5 or 6 years ago. 5 or 6 years ago, I would have panicked and I would have not been open about who I was. Whereas this time, I was able to say, no, this is what I want to do, and I want to be honest and I want to be open because that's important to me.
And at a certain point as well, I think it becomes a question of, because people think, disability, sexuality, etc., that disqualifies me. And I think about the exact opposite way. I think it qualifies you. I think it qualifies you to have the lived experience of struggles that so many people in your constituency go through. I don't think it's a disqualifying factor. I think it's the exact opposite.
Yeah.
I want to go on to I want to ask a question about representation, and which kind of thingies off of my previous point. See, I'm good like that. But why is it important for the LGBTQ plus community, for people who are disabled? Why is it important for them to be represented in our political system?
That's such a massive question.
I apologize.
No, don't apologize. That's me just thinking, really. For me, so there's this saying, and I can't remember, I think it's from the disabled rights movement, but if it isn't, then I'll apologize afterwards, which is nothing about me without me. And for me, it's so important that, the Welsh government, and as a result, the Senedd, in terms of scrutiny, have so much power over parts of people's lives that directly impact on disability. So power over the NHS, housing, social care, education. Those are all areas where being LGBT plus or disabled can be directly affected by what Welsh Government do. So for me, I want to make sure that there's someone in there, and there are from other parties. I'm not the only person from a disabled community or from the LGBT community, but we're still very much underrepresented. So that would help people know that there is someone in there who understands at least some of what it's like. But also, I would say that my experiences as a gay man and as a disabled person, I think make it easier for me to empathise and understand with everyone, not just people from sort of the same communities. Because when I talk to, you know, a single mum who's struggling kind of with heating and has to use a food bank, and you hear from people when they have to use a food bank that they feel shame. So having a politician who knows what it's like to feel shame, it might not be the same shame, but at least I know what it feels like. I think that's really powerful. So I think anyone who's had any kind of experience that's been difficult, that's what I hope to bring that understanding, really.
To be ashamed effectively of something you've got no control over.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think you answered that that answered my next question, well, right there, but I will ask, so if elected, what would your priorities be in the Senate?
So for me, my background means one of my first priorities is around housing. And housing is very broad, but it's about making sure housing is accessible, that homelessness crisis is ended. You know, we've got the ability to end homelessness. You know, it's not this inevitable thing that has to happen. People who have seen some of my literature across Islam will know that the second priority I want to focus on is about using, the Lib Dems have proposed £1 billion a year of funding for the climate crisis. And one of the things I'm really passionate about is using some of that money, maybe through a bid process, to transform the navigation colliery site in Crumlin, because it's a project that's massively, it's got such massive potential for jobs across Islwyn. And that actually creates a blueprint, which is what I want to see for places like Islwyn, where we've got such an amazing industrial legacy, a historical legacy. And if we could harness that heritage, and use that to drive forward, clean, green, new jobs, that would be my second priority. And my third one, absolutely, will be around the economy, and I say 1, 2, 3, but all three will be the joint first priority. The economy has to be recovered. That's the key challenge that will be facing the Welsh Government over the next 5 years. And one of the things that I'm really keen to do is make sure we move away from what I would describe as the corporate welfare approach of the Labour Party at the moment, which is meant in the best possible way. I'm not making a political point here, it's just a matter of priority. They have made decisions to bring in larger companies to sort of pave the way for those companies so that they can have sort of anchor investors within Wales. And I do get that. Our approach as the Welsh Lib Dems is to completely do it the other way around, which is to support the small businesses, which I think equates to about 50 to 60% of the Welsh economy, and actually grow our own Welsh business. And by supporting small local businesses, you can actually help communities recover so much faster than just pulling in the occasional big organisation or big company. So those are my three priorities.
As I mentioned in my intro, and there was a good priorities, by the way.
Thanks,
I'm not going to make a political endorsement on air. I'm impartial here.
Yeah, that's fine.
But I understand why those would be sort of top priority, and I understand the issues at the heart. I mean, in the environment in particular, it's we're staring at a catastrophe here.
Yeah.
And I'm generally pro not dying.
Yeah, that's always a kind of good idea.
So yeah, I'm generally pro. If we carry on this way, I could die. Yeah, I don't fancy it.
No, I don't know many people who would, so that's probably good.
And also, because I'm from a small village, small town in the valleys. Obviously, small business here is a huge thing. So, obviously I completely, completely aligned with supporting small businesses. And also your thing about like the issues that you support, that you've worked on, homelessness, you said, obviously housing, you said was a major thing for you, mental health, so many other things that you've worked on, as I mentioned in the intro, for more than a decade, as a charity campaigner. How's that going to translate into your work in the Senedd if you are elected, sir?
Yeah, so those three areas, mental health, housing and social care, are all massively linked. At the moment, one of the big challenges, and again, I'm not making a political point here, this is the same in almost every country across the world.
Feel free to make a political point at some stage. You're more than welcome to.
No, that's fine.
I'm not allowed to. You are.
No, that's fine. Everything I'm saying is political, but I definitely believe in talking about why people should support me rather than why they shouldn't support someone else. Across the world, those three areas are separated in almost every country, but they shouldn't be because the issues that people face don't fit naturally into three boxes. So for me, I really want to use my knowledge of those three areas, if I became a member of the Senedd, to really guide how services could work better together, to challenge the Welsh Government to do better, to stop this sort of really siloed approach where, one person needs help, but it's not my job to do that, you need to go somewhere else. So one of the policies that I'm most proud of that the Welsh Lib Dems have adopted is something called the no wrong door approach. So anyone who's ever tried to get help from anyone, you go to the GP and you say, oh, I'm really struggling with my mental health, and the GP might say, oh, well, here's some tablets, okay, well, that doesn't really solve the issue.
Off your pop.
Yeah. You go to the local authority and say, I'm about to be made homeless because I've lost my job and I can't pay my bills and everything's got so overwhelming and I'm about to lose my job and my house, so can you help me? Every step of the way, people are often said, oh, well, that's not my job, you need to go somewhere else. So the no wrong door means that whoever you talk to at any point is the one who has the responsibility to solve that issue. Now, that might mean that they sort of guide you to the right place, but at the moment, far too many people from the very first moment they need help are just told, oh no, you're in the wrong place, you need to go somewhere else, and that's not really good for anyone. So there's lots of things where I think my experience would help, but that particular area is one I'm most passionate about.
As somebody who's struggled to access mental health support myself, I mean, I'm fortunate in the sense that I've never faced homelessness. I've never been vulnerable to that. I'm very, very fortunate in that regard. But accessing mental health care is incredibly difficult in Wales, like you said. So yeah, I mean, I think that's incredibly noble, but it's incredibly powerful. The power that elected representatives have and the issues that they have sway over, as you alluded to earlier, it's incredibly. I find it fascinating. A lot of people don't, but I find it fascinating the amount of sway that they've got.
Yeah.
Elected representatives, and I do think it is important that you have somebody with lived experience. And like I said, it qualifies you. It doesn't disqualify.
Yeah.
I want to just, because I know that I'm going to let you go in not so long. If you've got a bit time for a couple more questions.
Yeah, that's great.
Lovely. Because there's something, and it came up. The reason, because this wasn't in my original questionnaire, but it came up. I saw on your, I think it was your Twitter feed,
Right.
about working full time while also running for public office, which that's a challenge that not many people appreciate. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that, because it's something that honestly I never really thought about myself. I was, because people have this assumption, oh, he's running for public office. He must, he must be loaded. He's fine. But no, but you're running, like you said, you're working full time. Could you expand on the challenges there, please, sir?
Yeah, so I'm really lucky. So my employer is really supportive. They've got flexi time, so I can kind of split my working day around the campaign, or put my campaign around the working day, depending on which one is most important at the time. It's also made easier by the fact that I'm working at home at the moment. It's probably the one good thing about working from home, really, because I miss the office and I miss my colleagues. But actually being able to finish work at 5 p.m. on the dot, get in my husband's car, get up to Isloin, deliver, talk to people, and then be back by 9. That makes such a difference, because it means I can do both. I think if I wasn't working from home, I wouldn't have been able to do half of what I've done. So the big challenge, I think, is trying to, because I work for a charity that is sometimes in the public eye, is trying to just make sure that I'm not saying something that they would find really awful. I mean, the chances of that happening are very low, because my values as a campaigner are exactly the same as my values as an employee. But that's always in the back of my mind. I'm like, oh God, should I be saying that, or should I be a bit softer, or so yeah, those are probably the two main challenges. So but the main one is just the hours, really. It's just sort of 12, 13 hours of campaigning, answering emails to constituents, and
and to people like me.
Yeah, but that's what campaigning is about, isn't it? So I've enjoyed it, and I've loved getting to know kind of all the different communities across Isloin. It's like I've been to a few of them as I was growing up. I've had friends that have lived there, and so I haven't been a complete stranger to Isloin, but yeah, it's just an amazing place, and that's made it easier as well, because I finish work at 5. I'm up somewhere within Isloin by about 5:30 or 6, and then I've got all of this amazing green space around me, and yeah, it's actually made me feel a lot happier.
Isloin's a beautiful place.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Ultimately, what are your hopes for Isloin going forward?
So regardless of whether I win or not, and I'm aware that the chances of a Lib Dem winning in Isloin are quite small. But maybe after the thousands of people watching this podcast decide, that might help. One of the things that I keep thinking this when I'm campaigning, that all the different communities of Isloin have got a different feeling. And I can't put my finger on what those feelings are, but when I've been in Abercarn or Newbridge or Crumlin, they all feel different. And yet, one of the things that really unites all of them is there is a sense of some sort of community, and whether or not that's the fact that when I walk around, there's just loads of people kind of chatting with each other, kind of on the doorstep, in a way that I don't really see all the time in Newport. Whether it's the fact that a lot of doors are unlocked when I'm delivering, again, I do not see that in Newport. And the fact that, yeah, that beautiful kind of countryside, like I was saying earlier, the sort of heritage that's around, the sort of old coal mines, that could be still adapted into something wonderful, So whatever happens, let me summarize that. My hope is that there is good investment into places like Navigation Colliery, but not just limited there, where we look at Islwyn and say, okay, well, this used to be the place with I think it was the area of the United Kingdom where there were more coal mines than in any other place in the United Kingdom. So it was an industrial heart of Britain. So wouldn't it be amazing if we had a Welsh government that made Islwyn the industrial heart of the green recovery? You know, when I've been driving around and I've just seen these sort of old buildings, and I've kind of closed my eyes and thought, oh, imagine if that was kind of done up again and people were coming into work and there were people building solar panels and people doing hydroelectric pumps and doing heat capture technology from the old mine workings, and new people coming into work, and a fund that invests in small businesses so that people can go back to their town centres, and there'll be good community spaces so people can, all of that. I just think is, yeah, there's just so much about Islwyn that we could do differently if we just had people in the Senedd who would really push for a different vision. And that's, again, not a criticism about, I'm not interested in criticising other politicians, but for me it's about, look, this is my vision, this is what I want Islwyn to be, this is, there's just so many amazing people, so many amazing places, and I just think the future for Islwyn could be amazing.
Oh, beautifully expressed.
It felt a bit rambly, but that's because I get.
Well, I mean, I would have interrupted you if I thought.
Yeah, fair.
And I'm sorry that I sounded so sarcastic, but no, but it was beautifully expressed, and it's been an absolute joy to meet you.
Likewise, it's been lovely to chat.
Best of luck with the campaign.
Great, thank you.
Whether I vote for you or not, I haven't decided. But
that's fine, and if you don't, that's still okay.
But regardless of whether you vote for Mr. Townsend or you vote for Ms. Passmore or Mr. Hamilton or any of the other candidates in this year's Senedd election, just vote. Do it. It's free. Oliver Townsend, everybody. And why is this a podcast? I'm Kieran Watts.